It's really important to nail your exposure. Or is it after all? Let's find out. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer and a Lumix ambassador. And in this video I'm going to find out how important it really is to nail your exposures. I have said it many times, and many of my photographer friends and YouTubers have said it many times, that you should always try to nail the exposure in camera. You should use the flag colors and expose to the right and check the zebra and histogram and whatnot. But in this video I wanted to experiment a little bit and find out if it really is necessary to do all that when you are taking your pictures. Is it really necessary to expose to the right and check the flag colors and zebras and histograms and all that? But before I go any further, please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't done that already, and tap the bell there so you'll get a notification every time I post new content. But let's first find out what is the correct exposure in the first place. Because there is no such thing as the correct exposure that would apply to every photograph. If I'm showing you this picture, you're probably going to say that it's way too dark, it's underexposed. But if I wanted my picture to look like this, then this is the correct exposure for this particular picture. Usually when we talk about the correct exposure, we are talking about something similar what we saw with our bare eyes when we took the picture, how the scene looked without the camera. So the photograph should have similar kind of brightness. And we also want the histogram to spread nicely across the frame. And that is usually how we want our pictures to look like, of course. But if you want your pictures to look a little bit on the bright side or a little bit on the dark side, then feel free to do that, and that is absolutely correct exposure also. If those pictures look good to you and if you think they look good like that, then you should do that. There is no universal correct exposure that you should use or try to get every time. And in this video I want to find out what happens if you totally ignore the in-camera exposure if you shoot RAW. What happens if you use the same exact exposure values all the time, regardless of the brightness of the scene in front of your camera? Does it have any impact on the outcome? I used two cameras for this experiment. The full frame S1 and the G90, which is a micro four thirds camera, of course. I went out on two separate occasions. The first day was really cloudy and overcast, and my photographs didn't turn out that well. And then I went out again today, and it was really sunny and beautiful day, and I got much nicer looking photographs. But still, none of my pictures are really remarkable photographs, but they work really well as test pictures. And I set my exposure values according to the brightest scene. And after that I shot everything using the same exact exposure values regardless of the brightness of the scene or brightness of my subject. And because I was shooting RAW, I was then able to bring back the brightness back to normal levels in post. And the shooting experience was kind of interesting and kind of fun, because I wasn't paying any attention to my exposures or how dark or how bright the picture was looking when I was looking through the viewfinder. And I turned off the constant preview on my Lumix camera so that the viewfinder picture would always look kind of correct. And I wouldn't even know how my actual exposure was going to look. And I learned that with the full frame S1 camera, I could easily increase the exposure in post by about 4 stops without any significant image quality loss. And with the Micro Four Thirds G90 camera, I could increase the exposure in post by about 2 stops without any significant image quality loss. But if I went beyond that and increased the exposure more than that, I could clearly see, especially on the Micro Four Thirds G90 camera, I could clearly see more noise in the shadow areas. But even so, I would say that the results were not that bad. And if I was going to print those pictures or publish them on Instagram or on some other social media platforms, I don't think nobody would notice anything. And of course, this applies only to this specific experiment. If you do this in low light, your results may be different. But I would say it's still much better workflow to fine-tune and nail the exposure in camera and then only do some tweaking in post. Because that's how you get absolutely the best image quality. And why wouldn't you do that if you have time to set the exposure values and take your time and check the zebra and histogram and flag colors and all that? But sometimes there is a situation, things happen fast and you simply have no time to check all the exposure values, and you just have to act quickly to get the shot. In those situations, I wouldn't worry too much about the exposure, as long as you are not overexposing so much that you destroy all the highlight detail. But if you go 2 stops under, 3 stops under, don't worry about it, because you can save that if you shoot raw. You can save that in post and make the picture look really, really good, and nobody will probably notice anything unless you tell them that you kind of screwed up the exposure in camera. I hope this video helps you to put things in perspective and helps you not to worry too much about the so-called correct exposure. By all means, if you have time and you know how to do it, try to nail it in camera, but if you can't, don't worry about it too much. And by the way, here's another video where I experimented the same thing in studio environment. Please check it out if you haven't done that already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.